The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
Lean in and listen. You are now experiencing Limitless. Here's your host, Michelle Lena.
Welcome to the neighborhood. If you live near me, I would bake you a fresh loaf of bread, and it would be piping hot and warm and smell amazing. Who am I kidding? I don't bake bread. To all of you who do, God bless you. Lean in and listen with me. Hi, I'm Michelle Lena. Welcome to Limitless. I am launching this podcast because I really believe in stories. I really believe that every single one of us has this amazing story, this adventure, this journey that you've been on. And I want to celebrate every single experience and every single story with you. I want to share all the stories because I believe that you and I get connected through stories. From the beginning of time, we have sat around as humans and shared stories, from the very first time around a campfire to creating songs and music, and everything comes down to the story. And that is really where connection happens. And I believe that connection is missing. And if I can be a little piece in this huge puzzle of life to bring some stories together to help you see that people have gone through hard shit, things that were overwhelming and challenging and difficult, cancer, divorce, death, finances, just all of the things, adoptions, miscarriages, all of those things we have gone through as humans. And when we share those stories and we share those experiences together, it's going to cause us to have a relationship, and relationships and connections are everything. And I really feel like they are so important to have in order to love ourselves. So this is why I'm launching this podcast. I believe that stories will bring us together. I believe that we are missing these connections, and I want to foster strong relationships through these stories. Your stories, my stories, everyday people deserve to have their stories shared. And this is the platform where you get to come and hear, or maybe you want to come and be on the podcast and share your life-changing story, how you had to crawl through the darkness and the shadows, and out of the ashes you came. And how did you get out? How did you rise up? How did you find the light? That's what I want to give to our listeners, to you, in my neighborhood, in my community. I want to foster these relationships. So I think the best place to start is with my own story. Hi, I'm Michelle, and I always wanted the last name Lena. My mother and father were going to give me the middle name Lena, but they did not. So I never had a middle name, and I thought that was really good because people with, like my brother had a middle name and they would yell out all of his names when he was in trouble. And I thought, well, I'm going to be the good kid, the special kid, the amazing kid, because I only have one name, so I'm never going to get in trouble. So I'm really taking on the ownership of Lena and taking on this name because in my family, there was not a lot of girls. In fact, on my father's side of the family, I don't think there was a girl for 4 generations until I was born. And so my opa, my father's from Germany. He was born and raised during World War II. And so he was very strong, very stubborn, and grew up with very little. And so he demanded a lot and expected a lot. And my opa said, well, Hankels do not have girls. But if you do have a girl, I've always liked the name Michelle. So my opa named me, and that is why my name is Michelle. And my oma's mother's name was Lena, and she wanted to give me Lena. But for some reason, Lena didn't make it in the mix, but now I'm owning it, because this is what you do when you own your story. You get to own your identity, and to own who I truly feel like who I am, I decided to take on the name Michelle Lena. So welcome to Limitless. I'm glad that you're here. I hope we make an amazing community and join together in this storytelling journey. I would like to start with my life and my younger self. My first memories were when I was 3 years old. When are your first memories? Why can some people remember further back than others? I think that's really fascinating, but I do remember my 3-year-old self. I remember my 3-year-old self very well because 2 events happened in my life at age 3. And one of them I labeled as really good, and one of them was labeled as really bad, hard, challenging. And I'm going to tell you about both of them. I'm going to tell you about the hard one first, because I always think whatever you need to lean into is probably the hard, because you're going to learn the most from the hard. So when I was 3 years old, my life got ripped apart. My childhood got stolen, and I was emotionally, physically, and sexually abused as a 3-year-old. And I don't recall a lot, but I do have flashbacks and triggers and this overwhelming feeling of darkness and loss. Like something got taken away from me and I couldn't explain it. And I didn't really realize how damaging that pattern was throughout my childhood until I was about 27, 28 years old. And I was sitting in a therapist's office trying to unpack my 3-year-old trauma. This abuse went on and off throughout my childhood. It's just experiences now. That's what I've labeled it. It's part of who I am, and it really dictated a lot of my choices and directions in my life, for the good and for the bad. There was also another beautiful memory that happened when I was 3. My brother and myself got enrolled in swimming lessons, and I was super excited for swimming lessons because the other choice was baseball, and 3-year-olds really can't do baseball, but a 3-year-old can learn how to swim. And we went to this swimming pool, and my swim teacher or coach or the guy who was giving the lessons, his name was Larry Swim. I mean, seriously, who's a better guy to teach you how to swim but a guy named Larry Swim? So I remember standing next to this big man, and he had a mustache and blonde hair, and he just looked huge to me, hence I was 3 years old. But I looked up at him and he said, "Do you trust me?" And I didn't understand that word, obviously, because I was 3 years old. But yes, I guess I trust you. And he picked me up and he threw me in the middle of the pool. And I definitely remember gasping and pawing at the water, and I was scared. And in it, that moment of being frightened, he picked me up instantly and looked at me in the eye, and he said, "This is what it means to trust. I will always be here, and I will keep you safe." And because of what had already happened to me prior to my swimming lessons, that felt very powerful, because another man made me feel unsafe and unloved and took something away from me. And this man was going to fill that hole in with something powerful and something good. I did learn how to swim. I joined the swim team at age 3. I had my first swim meet in December 1973. The next month I would turn 4. And I just remember being just so proud of myself. accomplishing that first swimming match and just getting to the end and having my coach lift me out of the water and telling me that I did a good job. It was such a strong core memory. Core memories are so, so important. What else can I share about my childhood? My father was from Germany. My mother was from a small town in Utah, and it made for interesting combination growing up with kind of two different cultures and two different languages and two different lifestyles. It was beautiful. I grew up in a very strict religion, and because that religion, certain choices were made for me, like what words to say, how to dress, who to serve, where to put your time, and really who to get married. And so I had the privilege of falling in love with my first husband. And because of the pressures of the church, we got married very, very young. I was married at 19. And we grew together and created an amazing family. We have 7 children together. 2 of them are natural and 5 of them we adopted. I've had 6 miscarriages. And then that beautiful season with my first husband ended after 32 years of marriage. And I found myself out in the wicked world of dating, and it was wild and crazy. And then I took some time to discover who I am. Before my divorce, which was about 3 years ago, my father crossed over in 2019 on Christmas Day. And then 13 months later, my mother crossed over. And my mother was really an important anchor in my life. Her strength, her kindness, her patience, her unconditional love was definitely something that was consistent and pure and peaceful in my life. And she really was my best friend. So losing my mother really was the last step in transforming and reclaiming who I was and my identity. So I was so loyal to my mother. When I was 15 years old, I asked for a tattoo. A tattoo. I mean, tattoos. And she said, no, you cannot have a tattoo until you're 15 years old. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so far away. She says, if you really want it, you'll wait until you're 30 years old. And I'm like, 30 years old. Okay, if I really want it, then I'll still want it when I'm 30. So when I was 30, damn straight, I got a tattoo. In fact, I got 2 of them. And I remember calling up my mom going, hey, I went and got my tattoo. And she's like, oh my gosh, I should have said 50. So again, I was taught to be obedient. And I waited until I was 50 years old. And I went and got a whole bunch more tattoos. And then my mom said one of the worst things that a mother could say. She says, over my dead body, will you get another tattoo? Well, unfortunately, my mom crossed just a short while after I turned 50. She crossed in 2021. And my life and my world has been completely different. And since then, I have lost many other people have crossed. One of my dear friends crossed because she was murdered. And I've lost cousins and uncles and other dear friends to illnesses and suicide. And so there's not very many stories that my personal story does not relate to, either through my 7 kids or through my own personal experiences. And that is why I want to do this podcast, is because when you go through huge events, you get experience. And then you get more experience with every story that unfolds in your life. You gain this beautiful experience, and experience plus experience equals wisdom. And wisdom is this beautiful gift that life gives you. And with that wisdom, you get knowledge. And when I was about 45 years old, people call it a midlife crisis. It's not. It's because your experience all gathers together and you can't sit in that seat anymore. And you have to claim yourself and your identity and your purpose. And that's what happened at age 45. All of these things started to unfold. And then losing my father and losing my mother and going through a divorce and losing many other people. And then just the tribulations of some of the events that my kids went through, all combined together made this fantastic experience. And I finally got the gift of wisdom and I reclaimed my identity and I went through every area of my life, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, all of that combined to figure out who I was, how I was going to dress, what words I was going to say, how I was going to understand my own spirituality, relationships, defining my own value system was a super incredible, powerful gift I gave myself. And that is why I'm landing on this podcast, is because I realized through all of these stories that I lived through and stories that other people have shared with me, it has really impacted my life. And that is the whole reason why this podcast is going to happen, is because the stories will impact each and every one of us in a different way, depending on what page we are. Hold on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As we're writing our own book, our own story, maybe I'm on page 486 and you're on page 126. But perhaps if you hear my story, it will help you gather your story and write more powerful pages and give you direction and give you hope and learn how to break barriers, learn how to live limitless, because that really is the power, that life has no limits, that life has no bounds, that we have been placed in certain parameters, a cage, a box, conditions, patterns, taught by people who absolutely loved us. My parents, I know they loved me. I know they did their very best, but there were many mistakes that were made by my community, by my religion, by my parents, by friends. They taught certain patterns and boundaries and values. Like I didn't have a choice if I spoke English or where I was born or just all of these different things. But what I did finally realize is that I was the one who could let myself out of the box, let myself out of the cage, that I was the one who held the key and I was the one that kept me there. And I could look at all of these patterns that were given to me out of love or maybe not out of love and decide whether if I wanted to keep them or not. But how I learned if these things were important to me was when they were applied to the stories of my life, to the experiences of my life, the good ones, the happy ones, the joyful ones, the hard ones, the ones that I stumbled through, the ones that were overwhelming. If I learned anything from any of those experiences, then it was good. So I want us to share stories. I want us to break barriers. I want us to learn to live without limits. I want and desire and hope that we can learn to live limitless. Join my community. Be a part of this journey with me. I appreciate your friendship. And I will end every podcast this way. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. We just got to go through the shit together. Carry on.